It's time for Outdoors Bound with George Noliff. Sponsored by Kubota of Lynchburg and Tony's RV.
Now, headed outdoors bound this morning, and what happens in the next couple of weeks in Richmond could have a big impact on practically every fish along the Atlantic coast, as well as wildlife and sport fish here in Virginia. It all has to do with funding for research into a tiny fish. WFXR's George Noliff takes a deeper dive.
Got him?
Yes, sir.
That scene's one that Captain Tyler Nunn depends on to make a living.
This is actually probably a slot fish.
Sport and commercial fishing on the Chesapeake Bay accounts for more than $1 billion of economic impact. Vital to that is a tiny forage fish called the Atlantic Menhaden, or bunker.
Every sport fish there is that's, bigger than your palm of your hand at one point or another is probably dependent, or a major part of their diet includes bunker Atlantic Menhaden.
That tiny fish has been at the center of a giant debate. Fishing guides like Nunn, as well as commercial fishermen and conservation groups, say they're seeing fewer and fewer menhaden in Virginia's portion of the Chesapeake, and they blame industrial reduction fishing for it.
The way I think about this, I mentioned that politics is overriding environmental policy.
Then there's wildlife. A recent study by researchers at William & Mary found decline in numbers of ospreys, a type of fishhawk, on portions of the Chesapeake. The study's author suggested it was because of decline in menhaden numbers.
Since about the early 2000s, we have seen a decline, and now we're at below 0.3 chicks per pair, and so we are actually now below what the population was producing during the height of the DDT era.
We should point out the methodology of that survey has been called into question by other researchers, though osprey numbers are down in some regions of the bay. Virginia is the only state on the Atlantic coast that allows reduction fishing in estuaries like the Chesapeake. Only one company engages in industrial reduction fishing on the bay. That's Reedville-based Omega Protein. They turn the fish into fish meal and fish oil. Omega says menhaden numbers are good, and they point to coast-wide data to prove it. However, critics say those numbers don't take into account the localized impact reduction fishing has on the bay.
We need some research, and we also need to make sure we're proactive or conservation-minded in our management.
The Virginia General Assembly's approved a study to be done by the Virginia Institute of Marine Science on menhaden numbers in the bay. The problem is that study was never funded.
I move to continue House Bill 19 to the 2025 session.
Second, Mr. Chair.
It's been moved and seconded that we continue HB 19 to the 2025 session.
The latest funding measure was shot down last year in committee with no explanation. Some lawmakers who voted against it have said it was a decision by party leadership. Now, a new proposal, a budget amendment to fund the study, is being put together by Delegate Paul Mildy of Stafford. He's on the record as saying, by investing in this research, we can make informed decisions about menhaden management and protect this vital species for future generations. Other lawmakers say they're cautious because Omega provides jobs and pays big tax dollars, but they'd be open to possibly funding the research.
Knowledge about an issue is always important, because then you've got to understand the impact of whatever legislation that you do pass. Let's take a look at what we're asking and the end product is, than what the cost of the research is going to be. But I'd feel more comfortable if we were doing it, in state with our own groups here.
We want to do everything that we can to be improving the health of the Chesapeake Bay and ensuring that, we are protecting our God-given natural resources in so many different ways, which would include, for sure, trying to do a study to ensure that we are doing everything we can to protect menhaden, but all of the important resources there in the Chesapeake Bay.
It's unbuttoning here.
So while lawmakers debate the menhaden study, watermen and guides and sport anglers say they hope for more information that a study could provide. A study that could have a big impact on their futures and the future of Virginia's portion of the Chesapeake Bay.
What's the cost to the bay? No one knows, because there's no real science on Chesapeake Bay menhaden.
So ensuring that we have enough of that forage fish out there in the ecosystem is where a lot of groups have been focused over the last couple of years to ensure we have a healthy overall ecosystem.
Redfish, red drum, same thing. Got a blue on his tail. Nice fish. We've seen some big ones.
How y'all doing, folks? Governor Glenn Youngkin's office has taken no official position on the Menhaden study, except to say that his office will work with all Chesapeake Bay stakeholders to, quote, ensure accountability and stewardship of Virginia's natural resources. Brandon?
And so you talked about Omega Protein. What was their take on this?
Well, Omega says it's also dedicated to preserving resources in the Bay, and that Menhaden numbers are strong. They based that sustainability on research that includes the entire Atlantic coast, not just the Chesapeake. Omega employs 260 people at its Virginia operations in Reedville. Those jobs pay well, and they are vital to that region. So that's got to be factored into this equation.
A lot of things to factor into all of this. All right, George, thanks.